Welcome to the Leather Lounge. My name is Sean Longstreet, and I am the community advocate for Leather Wallet and host for the Leather Lounge. Today, we've got a great conversation for you with Jakob from Hermetica. Hermetica is a DeFi platform built on stacks, and in this episode, we cover the real-world impact of DeFi built on Bitcoin, yield generation, and the mechanics of their new stablecoin, USDh, and so much more. He's a brilliant thought leader and builder in the space, and I know you're going to enjoy this conversation with Jakob from Hermetica. All right, hello and welcome everyone to the second episode of the Leather Lounge. We are going to be talking about DeFi today and about Hermetica, and we are joined by our fabulous guest here. Thank you so much. Jakob is making the rounds this today. So Jakob, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, GM. Nice. Good to be here.
So we've got, a good 45 minutes here. I definitely obviously want to talk about Hermetica. But I've been listening to a lot of your interviews, and I'm just so impressed with you as a thought leader in this space. So I would love to start with not only your background, but also, what is it that you find valuable about Bitcoin? What brought you to the space? Just give us an overview of your background and why you think it's so important to be building on Bitcoin.
Yeah. Thanks for the kind words. I can give it really the motivation to work on Bitcoin in Bitcoin really stems from my background. So let me give you a little bit of an overview there. I was always an entrepreneur since really the earliest memories, like my teens. I was already building businesses, selling stuff online, doing stuff with technology, got really into the first iPhone and Apple back in the day. And then in my 20s, I grew up in Germany, in Europe, in obviously very wealthy environment, or wealthy in comparison to the rest of the world, let's say. And in my 20s, one thing led to the other, and I ended up in Africa building a nonprofit for-profit business that was essentially bringing eyeglasses and eyeglass services to the developing world, mainly West Africa. I was very active in Burkina Faso, which is one of the least developed countries. I don't call it poor because it's very rich in many other ways, but at least developed. It's landlocked. It's basically desert. It's 50 degrees Celsius in the shade in the summer. It's really a really tough environment. I spent 3 years building the business there. It was very successful. It was very a beautiful experience, really, because we were bringing technology or a product to people that were not just happy to buy it. They were like literally praising God that we were able to give them the opportunity to buy something from us, which is call that product market fit, if you want. What that allowed me to see is that a lot of countries in Africa and throughout the world are not poor in their resources or their people. They're really exploited in many ways. And oftentimes, or most of the time, how that is done is obviously through a corrupt political system, but also mainly through the currency. The West African currency, there's a currency that is used for a lot of the countries there. It's called the franc CFA, is issued by the French central bank still to this day. And so there's powers that exploit the resources of those countries through the currency system. And so seeing that firsthand, seeing the people involved in that, I was obviously, as a white person, you're privy to more information, and you mingle in circles that allow you to see those things more firsthand, to be honest. That allowed me, and I was 23, 24, that allowed me to really understand how, unfortunately, those power structures work. But then when I discovered Bitcoin just like a year or two later, it was very quick for me to understand that, well, this is actually a technology that is not just going to like make things a little bit better, but it has the potential to fundamentally change the power structures all over the world and really be a force for good in establishing freedom and prosperity, which I think go hand in hand. You can't be free if you are destitute. to the human race, and to all of the people that deserve it, in my opinion, and have a birthright to have that. And so I dedicated my journey, my life, my professional journey to Bitcoin over the last good 7 years now. I'm in my mid-30s, and really studied everything that you can, anything that Bitcoin touches. And there's so many things that Bitcoin touches, right? Which makes it such a fascinating ecosystem and technology, from economics to trading to computer science, cryptography. I basically dove into each one of those fields for like a good year and a half or more to understand it. I started a Bitcoin mining company because I was like, what the in the world is this mining thing? How does this work? Actually learn it firsthand by actually building a business around it. I think that's at least for me always the best way to learn. Got into the futures markets very deeply. Was trading Bitcoin futures back in 2018 on BitMEX and other exchanges there. And then, ended up at Kraken at some point, really got into the whole crypto ecosystem, and learned that led me to Stacks. And here we are. Since a little more over a year and a half, we have been building Hermetica, which has the vision is to bring Bitcoin DeFi, bring DeFi to Bitcoin, and really build a decentralized financial system on top of what I believe is the most important technological layer of our generation, and hopefully bring products and services to people all around the world that allow them to gain freedom and prosperity.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you for painting that picture. It reminded me that, when people get a taste of these concepts of decentralization, trustless or trust minimized, and transparency, they realize how transformative those concepts can be on every aspect of their lives. So once they get a little taste of it, it has ripple effects. And when you talk about how this can really benefit the world and make it a better place, I see how your journey is aligned with that path.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential. I think that it's a technology that has so much to offer to the world, and it's obviously cloaked in a get rich quick scheme, which I think is a great go to market. Right? There's nothing more motivating than the desire to make more money. But yeah, so there's a lot behind, I think, the technology Bitcoin itself that will be revealed over the many years that it will prosper in the future. And right now, it's oftentimes perceived very narrowly as just a trading instrument.
Yeah, it's funny when you say like a get rich quick scheme. I know like a lot of people see it that way, but there's also this concept that Bitcoiners have for a long time preference, where that helps us kind of deal with the volatility. So I know a lot of people. This is something I've been thinking about in a lot of this Twitter spaces lately. A lot of people are in the space where maybe they're like, even though they're in Bitcoin, most people would think that like if you hold any Bitcoin, you're like high risk. But I think a lot of people who have a lot of Bitcoin probably actually see themselves as low risk, because if they're just holding Bitcoin in cold storage, like that's the lowest risk you can manage. You can have. But on the other hand, like there's nothing you can do with it. It just sits there. So what I'm so intrigued by is this concept of DeFi that's coming to Bitcoin through Hermetica, that is trustless or trust minimized, that allows you to do something with your Bitcoin and give it some power.
Yeah, no, I mean there's obviously a time and place for Bitcoin in cold storage. I think that is the most important feature of Bitcoin, that you can actually hold it yourself and secure it completely, and that's very, very important and should always be encouraged and celebrated, I think, as a feature. But also, if you look at the numbers, the amount of non-custodial wallets is certainly going down in terms of users. Like more users are coming that are coming online are choosing to hold their Bitcoin in custodial wallets, mainly on exchanges, obviously. And so there's a cohort of us that understand that and will continue to do that, but we can't expect the vast majority of users all around the world to be able to do that or even want to do that. So that's one. On the other side, there is, like, I see Bitcoin as the foundational asset of the new financial system, but there's so much that needs to be built in order to express the full suite of financial products and services on Bitcoin, which are necessary, right? Because if I think of it like we are in a competition with the incumbent system, which in my opinion we clearly are, right? Like if we're building a new financial system, we are in competition not with Ethereum or Solana, we are in competition with the TradFi financial system, which is, love it or hate it. I mean, there's a lot of things that are not really good, which I guess is the opportunity for us. But there's a lot of services that are built on top of the traditional financial system that work really, really well, and that serve millions and millions, if not billions, of people, right? And so we're competing against that, and we're still in our infancy. And obviously, like holding an asset, transferring an asset, and holding it in cold storage, awesome, right? That's the foundation. But we need much more than that in order to compete on a mass adoption level, right? Like we're still not we're at the beginning of mass adoption in my book. And so if we want to reach the masses, we have to offer them the full range, the full suite of financial products, and we have to do it better than what is available in the traditional financial system. Technology circuits, you always talk about 10 times better. It has to be a better UI UX. It has to give people the motivation and energy to switch, right? People don't like to change. And so if you have a new set of products that you want to offer, they have to be so much more appealing that people are excited to switch over and use them. And so that's the onus of us builders and product people in the space. And obviously Ledger is doing a fantastic job at providing a wallet service for that. I use Ledger myself, obviously. And so that's from where I come from.
Well, that's a beautiful transition then. So let's talk about the use cases and what exactly Hermetica is doing, and what we can be expecting over the next couple of months.
Yeah, so we have announced our USDh, our synthetic dollar product, which is essentially a Bitcoin-backed dollar-denominated asset. So you can think of it like holding US dollars in your Ledger wallet, in your Bitcoin wallet, and those dollars are actually, if you look under the hood, still Bitcoin. And how that is done is that we use derivatives contracts, futures contracts to be specific, to hedge out the dollar volatility. So we take one Bitcoin into the protocol, we sell one Bitcoin worth of futures contracts. So we essentially sell the Bitcoin on the futures market, and therefore lock in the dollar value of that Bitcoin, and then issue a on-chain representation of that in the form of USDH back to the user. So the user can hold USDH, which represents Bitcoin that is fixed in dollar amount, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's really useful, because one thing that I've heard you articulate is that, yes, many people recognize many of the qualities of Bitcoin, a store of value being one of them, but also that functionally, like, people still use the dollar as a unit of account. They need dollars. So that's why there's such a strong, such a big need in this space for a one-to-one dollar.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the dollar is still the most used and sought after financial currency in the world. Obviously, for Americans, it's the unit of account, but it's the unit of account really for the world in general. It's the world reserve asset, and if you look at adoption of stable coins throughout the world, there's massive amounts of demand for dollars, and a lot of people I was talking about Africa at the beginning of this conversation, but also global South America, Asia. They want to hold dollars, but they can't really access dollars in a bank account because they're not allowed to by the traditional financial system. And so them having access to stable coins on blockchains allows them to have a dollar bank account essentially in their pocket or in their wallet. And there's a big need for dollars because our expenses, our life is still denominated in dollars, and we need to account for that. And if we want to do that, we want to hold a dollar asset. But as a Bitcoiner, I don't necessarily want to hold dollar assets in the traditional fiat system because there's obviously risks involved with that. There's censorship, there's coercion. I think that we're we're seeing that very clearly now. I think that's going to accelerate and become more apparent as the system also becomes more fragile in the future. And so if we can hold a dollar but not leave Bitcoin, that which essentially is USDh, that is very appealing to me as a Bitcoiner. And then obviously there's also the yield aspect to it that makes it even more interesting.
Yeah, let's talk about the yield. And it might be a little bit of a triggering word for some people, because when I think about yield, I think back to like the BlockFi and the Celsius, which so many people got caught up in. I actually did a little bit too. So when people talk about yield, I think they put on their due diligence hat, and they want to know, in the name of transparency and due diligence, I think people should be on the lookout. They should understand where the yield comes from. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, 100%. You should always know where the yield comes from. It should be always very clear, and there should be a economic reason for it. Like there should be like a fundamental reason for the yield, and not just printing of a token or some sort of promise. And so the yield for USD, it has a very fundamental sound element to it, because it's the funding rate from the short futures position. The crypto markets want to be leverage long Bitcoin or in general crypto. So there is a demand for leverage. And that leverage has to be paid for, or there has to be somebody providing that leverage. You can think of it almost like a service provider, right? Like if somebody wants to buy water, then somebody is there to sell water. If somebody wants to be long Bitcoin, there has to be somebody else that provides you the opportunity to be long Bitcoin. And so as the protocol sells futures, it is essentially providing long leverage to other participants. And those participants are willing to pay for that privilege to be long. And that yield from those people that want to be long can be very significant, especially in bull markets. Last bull market, 2021, that yield was 26% annualized. Now, obviously, this fluctuates with the demand for longs. In a bear market, it's significantly lower, right? In the 23 bear market, it was around 3.8%, and on average, it's around 12% if you take the last 4 years and average it out on an annualized basis. So the yield is not fixed, not guaranteed, but fundamentally sound in that it is essentially harvesting the demand for long leverage.
Nice. Okay, so that's where the yield is coming from. Something else that I've heard you talk about is really how you're democratizing access to more sophisticated trading strategies, where in America, you'd have to be an accredited investor, which is probably like not many people listening to this, to this show. So talk to me about that and what that means for people, again, on the due diligence, but for people who do want to step in and up their game and have access to these more sophisticated trading strategies. How is Hermetica enabling that?
Yeah. So obviously, you have to be careful about the legal implications, especially with the U.S. Like we can't offer services to non-accredited investors unless there's the right structure for it. But the rest of the world, fortunately, doesn't have these kind of limitations as the U.S. It's very unfortunate, in my opinion, that the U.S. has these very strong regulatory requirements. But essentially, a lot of very sophisticated strategies or financial products are gated, be it through legal requirements like the SEC requires in the US, but also in general just by the complexity of the products and availability for noble folk to get access to that. And so our goal is to make strategies that are more sophisticated available in a way where it's still legally compliant. Right? I have to like emphasize that, and unfortunately, not necessarily always available to Americans, but to the rest of the world. That usually would necessitate a significant amount of capital to get a seat on the table, and or a significant amount of understanding of the financial infrastructure and the ability to execute these kinds of strategies or transactions and make them available in an easy to use tokenized form. USDH is one aspect of that. We also have another product line, which is or earn strategies that allow you to get access to option strategies that are executed and designed by very sophisticated quant partners of ours at 2Prime. Those are right now actually live on mainnet for STSDX, and there will be future strategies for Bitcoin. But yeah, so our goal is to essentially make what is complex and difficult to access easy to understand, easy to execute, and more accessible to folks.
Well, that's really appealing to someone like me because, I see in my Schwab account or whatever, I see that there are other trading options. But to be honest, like I've looked at them a little bit. Maybe I've seen a couple like videos on how it works, but I haven't pulled the trigger and like done enough research where I can confidently trade that way. But I think that this is appealing to someone like in my situation where I can say, okay, I want to put a little bit, like some percentage of my Bitcoin to use with someone who knows, the best way to handle these strategies.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, there are, we have like some really smart people on our team that are quite sophisticated at designing and executing the strategies. The other element is the automation of it, right? And the easy accessibility. Like, one is understanding the strategy, the other thing is actually executing it on a regular basis. And then the other part is that you really get full transparency because a lot of this is happening on chain, so you can actually monitor and audit what is going on in real time, which you obviously don't get in a Schwab account or other offerings in the traditional finance world.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, I definitely I want you to break down for us and clarify like how X-Link can work and how, you bridge back and forth between L1 and L2. But I also want to make sure that Brandon also, jump in with any questions if you want to.
Yeah, Jakob. Yeah, thank you for joining us today. I run our social media here, so I'm behind the scenes in leather. But I wanted to jump on and also.
Brandon.
Oh, we can't hear Brandon. Okay.
No, I can't hear him. I think it's an issue on my end, probably.
Okay. Could you hear me, Sean? Or
I can hear
Maybe
you. Yeah.
Okay, I'll drop down and I'll come back.
Okay, he's gonna drop down and come right back. But yeah, can you talk about? Let's put this in the context of Bitcoin L1. It's a settlement layer. It's expensive to transact on. That's a good thing. It's it's slow to change. Ossification. We're approaching that. It's slow to change. So the innovation and a lot of the activity is going to get bumped to L2s. So could you talk a little bit about the L2 space in general? What's happened? Because there's a lot of development happening. Stacks is just one of the things happening. So obviously you're building on Stacks. You're using the Clarity Smart contracts. So could you give us an idea of how these two work together for Hermetica?
Yeah. We've been building on Stacks. We've been using Clarity Smart contracts, which are really cool in our opinion. But to answer your first question in terms of what does the L2 landscape look like and how is it evolving, I think it's like kind of hard to keep track of at this point because there's just so much interest, innovation, and new project coming online.
Right.
But we're seeing, I think that Ordinals really kicked it off. There's a new way to interact with Bitcoin now, right? To use it as a data layer and use inscriptions to use inscription actually in very innovative ways to build CK rollups and other L2s on top of Bitcoin, which we're still in super early days. There's some really fascinating projects, in my opinion, that are attempting that, and other L2s that are coming online. I think there's like over 100 L2s at this point, I was told from somebody that tracks it. And so,
Wow.
like Cambrian explosion, right? A lot of those will probably not go very far, I would expect. Some of those will be super interesting and useful. Stacks is special because Stacks has been doing what is now cool for like many years, right? It started, if my memory serves me right, 2017 and went live in 2021. So it has been building the technology stack and the community for such a long time that we're now at a place where really you see the dividends and you see the economic value of that compounding. We're building on Stacks because we see the technology stack as very well thought out, The community is amazing and really supportive. And so there's a lot of opportunity to build Bitcoin DeFi on Stacks. Clarity in itself is an amazing language, in my opinion. I write Clarity on a daily almost. I'm our lead smart contract engineer, and it's really fun to work with. It's also sometimes a little bit clunky on purpose, right? There's like elements to the language that are intentionally made more difficult. It's not Turing complete, and it doesn't allow you to do specific things that have caused big bugs in the Ethereum world. But it's in general a very well designed language that allows you to do a lot of things very well, and allows you essentially to extend the functionality of Bitcoin and introduce smart contracts to do all the DeFi stuff that we want to build and love.
Yeah. Brandon, is your mic working now?
Hopefully, yeah. Jakob, can you hear me okay now?
Yes, I can. Nice to meet you.
Wonderful, yeah. Yeah, I'm our social media manager. Just to introduce myself for Leather. I wanted to make sure that I came up here because not a lot of people know this, but prior to me being at Trust Machines, I actually was at BlockFi, so I had some firsthand kind of experience to seeing some of the risks and some of the things that happened there. And I know Longstreet already kind of talked about that a little bit, but when I hear something like a Bitcoin backed stablecoin, I think elephant in the room, a lot of people think of something like Terra Luna. And obviously this is a very different sort of structure than something like that. But I just wanted to give you sort of a platform to talk about why this is, a very different type of product. I know you've already kind of gone into a little bit on like how the yield is generated, but maybe you could just kind of contrast that, a little bit more. Just to explain that for the audience.
Yeah, totally. Great question. I mean, I think we all have like PTSD from Terra Luna. It was like one of the most interesting Ponzi schemes in history, I think. I mean, like it went up to like, what was it, 120 billion in market cap at some point, and then vanished in a week, I think. So it was like, obviously people lost a ton of money, and it was kind of deceptive, or I don't think it was necessarily deceptive, but it was very poorly designed, or like the design in itself was not sound. And how it worked is essentially that the stablecoin was backed by a governance token, Luna. So USDT, the USDT was backed by Luna, which in itself didn't have any value other than being the governance token of the blockchain. And so there's a circular negative feedback loop where if there's an issue, Luna goes down in value, which then reduces the backing for the stablecoin, which then creates a vicious downward spiral, which is what happened, and then it implodes. What we're doing is really fundamentally completely different, has nothing to do with Terra Luna, and is a completely different design. It is essentially Bitcoin plus a derivatives trade. And it is really backed by Bitcoin in that if you look at the balance sheet of the protocol, there's assets, there's liabilities on the balance sheet, right? Assets back the liabilities, just to make the accounting lingo a little bit clearer. And if you look at the balance sheet of Terra Luna, it would be the stablecoin on the liability side, and then Luna, the governance token, on the asset side. So it was backed by, not by Bitcoin, it was backed by its own governance token. And if you look at Hermetica's balance sheet for USDh, it will be USDh on the liability side, and Bitcoin, and the P&L from the futures contracts on the asset side. So it's quite literally in call it accounting lingo backed by Bitcoin, and so it has completely different risk profile from Luna. It doesn't have a vicious cycle, vicious downward spiral. There's other risks. I don't want to like gloss over the risk. There's certainly a risk, and we should talk about them. Mainly, there's a risk of negative funding rates, which happens 5.8% of the time in our back tests, which obviously can lead to a negative yield, which we have we have an insurance fund in place to buffer that out. There is counterparty risk. We're trading on centralized exchanges. We're using off-exchange settlement services that hold the assets outside of the custody or outside of the bankruptcy estate of any centralized exchanges. But all that to say is that Terra Luna was a different system, different risk profile, and I think fundamentally flawed in the design, and that invites for a vicious downward spiral, which is what happened. Our system doesn't have those same dynamics and is fundamentally different.
That's a great question, Brandon. Thank you. Okay, so time is flying. I still have a lot of questions, but let's say I take 10% of my Bitcoin holdings. I put it over into my Hero wallet, and I want to start putting it to use like tonight after the show. Can you walk me through, what that's going to look like on your platform as it is right now?
Yeah. So USDH is not live yet. We are in the process of auditing the contract, and it will be live in the next weeks. But once it is live, you would be able to. So USDH is not replacing Bitcoin in your portfolio. Just to make that clear, Bitcoin has a nice upside potential, and obviously we all love the exposure to Bitcoin. USDH is a dollar asset, and so it is a replacement for any dollars in your portfolio. So if you want to hold dollars, you're able to buy USDH on the open market through decentralized exchanges like Bitflow, like Alex, like Valar, and others on stacks, and that would allow you to get access to USDH. And then if you want to access the yield, you have to go and stake that USDH on our website, and you get a staked version of the USDH that accrues the value from the funding rates automatically. So I would say think of USDH as a dollar that is still Bitcoin, but it's a dollar, right? It's not giving you exposure to Bitcoin. It's giving you exposure to dollars, and it can give you also a nice yield on top of that, especially in bull market. So what I would do and what I will do in my own portfolio is that if we get nice rallies and I need to hedge out or want to hold more dollars, I will transition my Bitcoin and my other crypto holdings into USDH and earn yield while the bear market happens, and then go back into whatever exposure I want to get. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really good plan. Okay, good. So what will change when we do get Nakamoto? Looks like late August. What's going to change for Hermetica?
Yeah, we're obviously super excited about Nakamoto. What is going to change is, I think what is going to change for everybody in the ecosystem is that we'll finally get a very cool user experience, or like a very fast and cheap user experience. Our contracts work now, and our contract will work the same when Nakamoto is live, but it will be a better user experience, and that everything will be a lot snappier and a lot cheaper. Those are the things that we're excited about. Obviously, that if you peek under the hood, then also the security assurances of the chain will be significantly better in terms of Bitcoin finality, which as a user experience you don't really see, right? But as a developer and builder, you think about a lot, because obviously you don't want any security problems to happen. So that is also great to have with Nakamoto. And then obviously the next big milestone after that is SBTC, and that will allow us to actually express more trading strategies that are denominated in SBTC, right? This is not USDH. This is our other product line. You'll be able to engage in trading strategies, option strategies to earn yield on Bitcoin, actually, with SBTC when that comes live, I think somewhere in the fall.
Okay, yeah, beautiful. Well, so something that's important to me is education. I'm an educator by background. And I heard you talking about on your website, you guys have an education element. Can you talk about that? Especially, when I think about the damage that was done and the fallout from the BlockFis and Celsiuses of the world, there's education that needs to happen in this space. So can you tell us about how you guys are supporting the education in this space?
Yeah, I think that we obviously want to contribute as much as we can to educating folks about DeFi and how our products work, how other products work. I guess that's what we're doing right now, being on this show and talking to you and engaging with folks across Twitter, across Discord. We have a newsletter that we send out every week where we go pretty deep on the market and talking about what's going on with funding rates, what's going on with volatility, what's going on in the macro sense of things. So if you want to get access to that, it's completely free. We have a very talented professional trader write those newsletters and provide alpha. You can sign up at Hermetica FI, get that every Friday, and obviously have all the documentation and information about how our system works always clearly there. Yeah, that's. I mean, I love education. I see myself as an educator as well. Obviously, as a founder and CEO, you don't necessarily have that much time to do it, but we try very hard to break things down that are usually pretty complex or are complex, and make them accessible in more easy to understand language. Obviously, it's not it's not always easy, right? Because there's a lot of nuance. But that's our goal, and that's what we do with our blog posts. That's what we do in our documentation, and that's what I hope I'm doing right now, talking to you guys here.
Absolutely, yeah. We're very honored to have you here. Before we're ending the space, if anyone does have any questions, feel free to jump up. NFY, did you want to have a question here?
No, I don't have a question. I'm just reading about, as far as I'm reading, I really love the concept. I will definitely try to also do a video on, how to use Leather BTC, and I'll also try to, do a summary video on Hermetica Finance, because I think uh, these kind of concepts are very, very interesting. And of course, after the ordinal run and all of these, uh, we can say ordinal runs and runes run or whatever you want to call it, I feel the market is reacting very positively to Bitcoin finance. So I'm really bullish on Bitcoin finance as a whole. And yeah, I'm just reading more about it as much as I can, and we will all love and support you guys.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I don't think we get enough content creators making video walkthroughs, because everyone, when they make their own little videos, they have their own way of explaining things, and so I think that's always a good thing to contribute. Something that we talk about on the space in the Leather Lounge is how everyone can contribute in their own way, and Brandon said it really well on one of his shows. Let me plug that show. So Brandon has a show, Good for Bitcoin, every Friday. So definitely to tune in on that. But one point that he made is that you don't have to be a Bitcoin developer to be building on Bitcoin and to be contributing to the space. So if the ethos speaks to you, if you're passionate about this space, find whatever way speaks to you to contribute and make a big difference. Because one thing that I love about this space, like we've talked about, it's the ethos of decentralization, trustlessness, transparency. It attracts a lot of people who are really head set on making the world a better place. And that's why I find, Jakob so inspiring too, is the ability to execute and make Bitcoin more interesting and more useful. So Jakob, let me ask you kind of a non Bitcoin question. When you're not slinging smart contracts and diving into DeFi, what kind of when you're sitting around in the lounge at the end of a day, what do you like to drink?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't drink alcohol, so I would say San Pellegrino sparkling water. My family's Italian, and I actually lived right next to the San Pellegrino source at some point. So I love that water.
Sounds delicious.
Yes.
And you're based in Europe right now. You're living in Italy.
I'm in Panama. But I grew up in Germany and Italy.
Beautiful. Well, Jakob, I think, Brandon, are there any other questions we can ask before we end here?
I didn't have a question, but I did just want to comment and thank you for, as a follow-up to my question, you mentioned some of the risks that are kind of a real part of sort of any, of these sort of yield protocols. So I definitely I appreciate that, not being a black box, like some of these other centralized parties are, so it's really important, I think, to be upfront about the potential risks so you could really make an informed decision. So really, I just wanted to, again, thank you for coming up and joining us and yeah, specifically talking about that, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for bringing up the awesome question, and nice to meet you, and thanks for having me, guys. And there's nothing we want to hide. We want to be, we want to show all the risks. We want to show obviously also the potential and benefits that you can get. But I think we need to inform people as much as possible so that everybody can make the decision that is right for their portfolio and their risk profile. And we're all on board. Thanks for creating the space for us to chat. Happy to come on board at any time in the future if there's another opportunity, and love what you guys are building and doing.
Definitely. I think we'll have to have a obligatory follow-up after Nakamoto goes live, because it'll be really fun to check in with you and see how things are going then too. I do have one more question. You talked about what you were doing in your 20s and how you got into Bitcoin. I would love to hear what you're thinking about, like, as you set long-term goals. Where do you see yourself and this space in 5 years?
Yeah, a good question. I think that we're just getting started with Bitcoin DeFi, and Bitcoin is the mother chain, and everything will come back or will be built ultimately on Bitcoin and will accrue the most value. So I see us in 5 years from now being the biggest DeFi ecosystem in the world, or compared to all the other ecosystems. So we'll eclipse Ethereum, Solana, and the others. Obviously, right now that's kind of ludicrous to say, because if you look at the numbers, I think it's like 100 to 1. Like there's 1% of TVL in Bitcoin DeFi compared to Ethereum DeFi. Ethereum DeFi is super sophisticated and some big brains working over there for sure. And we're obviously learning a lot from them. But I think that fundamentally the soundest foundational layer for a financial system is Bitcoin. And there is the most capital, right? Over $1 trillion in capital latent, waiting to do something. And in 5 years, we'll see this, our ecosystem, the Bitcoin ecosystem, be the biggest DeFi ecosystem. And therefore, we'll see all the primitives there, all the applications that we can imagine, and just a lot of activity, and hopefully not the awesome 20 people that we have on this call right now, but like spaces with like 20,000 or 2,000 people. I'm really excited about it, and it's going to be a fun ride.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Jakob. Everyone, if you're not following already, please do also make sure you've got notifications on. So thank you again, Jakob. We are this is our second episode of the Leather Lounge, and we are live every week at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. So tune in, and thank you all again for joining.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Leather Lounge. Leather is your gateway to everything Bitcoin, from DeFi to stacks, ordinals, runes, stamps, NFTs, and more. Don't forget to visit our blog and learn center at leather.io and join the conversation on X every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern.